Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Ann coming to you from San Clemente. Today we welcome back Jeff Ravitz and Jim Moody to Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. If you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
And Sistah.
Right, and Sistah. Welcome, everyone, to episode 216. And first, we want to welcome back our Lumen sister, Ann McMills, to Light Talk. How you doing, Ann?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be back. You know, it's been one heck of a year, but here I am on Light Talk. That makes me happy.
Now, do you have your mask on right now?
I do not, thank goodness. I'm alone in a room.
Okay.
And vaccinated.
Yes, totally vaccinated.
Yeah, I have a cat with me. I think they're fine.
Oh. You know, they do, pets can get COVID. I read that somewhere.
Some tigers or something. I need more research.
Okay. Anyway, it's wonderful to have you back with us. We really missed you.
Thank you.
But you made it for a very special show, because today we have a treat for you, our listeners. As promised, we are welcoming Legends of Light, award-winning lighting designers Jeff Ravitz and Jim Moody to the show. Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing great, thank you. I love what you've done with the studios here. Good lighting.
The studios.
And I'm just living the life up in paradise here near to Santa Barbara, drinking my smoothie and living the good life in California.
Jim is on a boat, or excuse me, a yacht, like floating around somewhere in the Channel Islands. And boy, that is the good life. You deserve it, my friend. You really do.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's just about everyone knows Jeff Ravitz and Jim Moody are truly legends of light. They have designed the lighting for countless television shows, spectaculars, and superstar rock concerts. But this show is not really about celebrating their amazing careers. Jeff and Jim are here to tell us about their new book that will be available next week, Lighting for Televised Live Events, Making Your Live Production Look Great for the Eye and the Camera. In my opinion, this is a book that is sorely needed in lighting education and should also be quite useful for lighting professionals who may now be realizing the importance of lighting your theatrical shows for video. It's incredibly timely as everything is now on video. But before we get started, Ann, could you please tell our listeners a little bit about Jim and Jeff?
Sure. Jim Moody has over 50 years in the entertainment lighting industry, working in theater, concerts, TV, corporate, themed, and architectural lighting. He has degrees in English from Southern Illinois University and theater lighting design from UCLA, as well as a doctorate in educational management from the University of Phoenix. He is a fellow of USITT and the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts. He has also served as the head of design at the Los Angeles Theater Academy. He has been recognized with awards in theater, concerts, television, and corporate production. He has written 2 incredible books, The Business of Theater Lighting Design and 4 on concert lighting. Amazing. He has published over 50 articles in trade magazines, and this new book will be his 7th and is a collaboration with Jeff Ravitz. Oh, you're my hero. Jim and Jeff go back almost 30 years and had partnered in 2 design firms, Moody, Ravitz, and Hollingsworth, and Visual Terrain. Now retired, he lives on a yacht, as David mentioned, in the Channel Islands Marina in Oxnard, California. Amazing. And secondly, we have Jeff Ravitz, who is an Emmy Award-winning lighting designer, lecturer, and writer specializing in live entertainment being captured for multi-camera television. He is best known for his work with Bruce Springsteen. Jeff has designed concert tours as well as numerous TV specials for music, comedy, political debates, celebrity interviews, and extravaganzas, as well as game shows, talk shows, and specialty scenes for feature films. Jeff has also been the broadcast lighting advisor to several music festivals. He provides his services through his design firm, Intensity Advisors, and has twice been named Lighting Designer of the Year. Woo!
Wow,
Welcome,
I like
guys.
that name. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Intensity Advisors. I need an Intensity Advisor. Anyway, thanks, Ann, for those great bios. So just to give you a little background, the Lumen family read the book this past week. And I must say that not only does Jim and Jeff cover just about everything you need to know about preparing a show for the camera, they explain these highly technical concepts in an easy-to-understand conversational style. The book is filled with beautiful color photos, graphics, charts. There's some terrific advice on using follow spots, moving lights, and LED panels in a video environment, great chapters on contrast and color, dealing with multiple camera and lighting angles, and so much more. But enough of my comments, let's talk to the masters. So let's get started, Jim. You've written extensively about concert lighting and production. Where did the idea of this book come from?
Actually, it came from my wife. I was looking around for another project after the last concert book. And she was the one that came up with it. She said, well, why don't you talk to Jeff about co-authoring a book together? And I thought, terrific idea. And maybe he'll be stupid enough to agree, not knowing what it takes to write a book like this. We'll have to ask him how he survived the 2 years of it. But Jeff actually came up with more of the idea of doing it about the large screen video magnification than I did.
Yeah, well, look, it was a great collaboration. Of course, I respect Jim and all the writing that he's done over the years, so I was humbled by the offer and thought, where do you begin? But Jim kind of tutored me through the process, and it worked out great. It ended up being a labor of love.
Well, let's jump on that word process. So how long was this process, gentlemen, and are you still on speaking terms? Does Jeff get to come to the yacht every now and then?
Is he invited to the yacht?
He has been here. Yes, he has. The process was 2 years because of Jeff's work. I was semi-retired by that time, so I was sitting here waiting for, his work to come in, and as it did sporadically, we would get together in our office. Art's Deli and Jerry's Deli up here was our office for the time. And we would meet and go over things, but most of it was frankly done on emails and phone conversations, but it worked out fine.
That's amazing. So you guys sort of met in delis. So there's just two delis, right?
Yeah.
It's the only place where we could really get privacy and pickles.
Yeah. Pickles,
okay.
Yeah.
And I have a very important question. Who makes the best matzo ball soup? Is it Art's or Jerry's?
Art's.
Okay. It sounds like we have a difference of opinion here for matzo balls. All right. Because I've been searching for the perfect matzo ball.
Well, I think Cantor's actually has it, but that's not really in our
Cantor's.
neighborhood. So.
That's true. That's
I
great.
think we should abandon what we're talking about and go further into the matzo ball soup.
Yes. Yeah, that is the topic of our next book, so it's interesting that you bring that up.
Well, Ann, I think you're knocking on the door there. The question is, how do I take a bowl of matzo ball soup and make it look good both for the eye and the camera?
Yes.
Okay, enough about matzo balls. Ann has our next question.
What were your own career paths to working in this niche of the lighting design world?
Yeah, for me, I started in television pretty early on, based on a director that I had worked with who was a manager of a band. And he got a TV show and drugged me along, luckily. And of course, I stumbled through doing the first productions. And actually, in one production, I got locked out of the control room by the engineers because I didn't know what I was doing, literally. So
Don't open the door.
Yeah. But you learn. And there weren't, the only books out there were some cinematography books, but they really didn't cover what I needed to adapt my lighting for the television audience. But then I got the Don Kirshner Rock Concert Series, which was the first time concert groups were actually booked to perform and to try to look like the tour. Now, we couldn't do it in those days exactly like that. We were literally using 5K Fresnels as backlight and changing out the color filters between acts. But it was a start, and things progressed from there until when I got Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and Entertainment Tonight, where working with the television subtleties of lighting became more important. So it's a process of adapting from different forms of lighting, the theater, television, what the film did, all mixed together to create what you needed for the show.
Well, I was always interested in the theater. I grew up outside the New York, Manhattan area, and so I was exposed to professional theater early on. And when I went to school, I got extremely interested in lighting, and I decided to specialize in that. But right after I got out of school, it was the world of concert lighting was really just beginning to be seen, and concert production. It was just starting to go from the most basic to a little hint of what we have today and growing from there. So I was in the right place at the right time. And then bingo, music videos suddenly appeared thanks to the creation of MTV. So I really got the bug, and my concert artists were all being shot for either a one-song video or for a long-form entire show taping. And so I was beginning to get a sense of it. And then it was years later that I began partnering up with Jim, and he gave me so many opportunities to substitute for him. We talked endlessly about the techniques, and then I took over some of his shows as he moved on to others. So anyone who knows Jim knows how generous he is with his knowledge. And again, I was just kind of in the right place at the right time to benefit from the whole thing. So that was sort of how I got on that track.
The title of the book is Lighting for Televised Live Events. What exactly are you referring to with the term live events?
Well, these are shows or presentations that, for the most part, if it wasn't for the presence of the cameras and TV crew, it would be a straight live production with an audience sitting there in the venue. But because there is this television component added, and presumably to broadcast or webcast the show to the outside world, there's another audience to consider. And, that audience could be in the millions in many cases. And they also probably are contributing greatly to the revenue stream of the production. So for that reason, the audience and the fact that they can only see the show on their screens, there's arguably a reason to think that you might want to pay attention to the quality of the look. So that's really what televised live events is all about. And we include concerts, stand-up comedy, debates, corporate shows, plays, dance and opera, and those are all live shows that are just often shot to be seen and enjoyed by the wide or outside audience.
What do you think, Jim?
I think, the rights in theater and musicals are growing daily. I mean, the amount of productions that are using video on Broadway, for instance. Mm-hmm. There was a show, and I can't remember the name, I tried to look it up, a couple of years ago, that all the walls of the set were video screens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, gentlemen, let's talk about this subtitle. Making your live production look great for the eye and the camera seems to suggest that the eye and the camera are mutually exclusive devices and they can't play together. My question then is, with all the advances in camera technology, why can't I just bring a camera into my theater and let normal stage lighting work?
Well, look, I mean, they can coexist, and that's kind of the premise of the book. Everything that we write about contends that a show that's being tailored for the camera can be designed in a way that works well and has all the dynamics of a show that might not have been designed for TV. The cameras can capture most of what's being lit by the non-TV stage lighting techniques. So, why do you have to change anything? Well, it's not just about the exposure, because the cameras can get the exposure, and most shows will have enough light in most of the time so that the camera can properly see. But it's about the aesthetics, and it's about the angles, and it's about kind of remembering that most of the audience is going to be more or less in the front row, nose to nose with the performers by virtue of the close-up shot. And those close-up shots can look a little unflattering if you don't think of a few techniques of angle and balance and color and so forth. It's about that frame of reference that the viewing audience has. So that's kind of it. Yes, you can capture the show just as well with absolutely no adjustment. But there are just a few things, if you just make a few tweaks and a few adjustments, you can make something that looks good for the camera, and I think it also retains the dynamics for the live audience.
Well, I liked a little bit in the book, where it says multiple shadows are not your friend, and a backlight can fix just about everything.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's true. What we think of in theater as the canvas look for a theater production doesn't necessarily read well when you're trying to record it. So, as Jeff has very well pointed out in some of those chapters, the dynamics of where you light from, what angles you use, actually expand when we're doing it for video and recording, that make the show look even better than what it would be.
Well, it's interesting because, that old mantra, up and out at 45, and that's one of the things that you talk about in the book. Maybe that 45-degree angle is not the best angle for the camera.
Right.
And, there's an exception to every rule as well. Sometimes you want that dramatic look. Maybe you want that downlight where, there's drastic shadow. And that's okay. I mean, I think our sensibility has evolved over the years, and I think that can be acceptable. But for the most part, those are effects. And as I say, just sometimes the slightest adjustment can make all the difference in how somebody looks, without losing the drama.
Right. Yeah, and I must say that throughout the book, there are these little adjustments that you talk about in order to make this work. A big part of it is color. A big part of it, like you said, is angle. Also contrast and ratios and brightness. It's all very clear the way you explain it in the book, which is really quite wonderful. Okay, so this next question, I'm going to ask it sort of like we ask on Passover during the Jewish holiday of Passover. And that is, what makes this book different from every other book about cinematography, TV, on-studio lighting, or lighting for the theater? What makes this book special?
There are so many books, as you say, written about cinematography and videography and episodic TV and three-point interview lighting. But this covers this really niche market, this very specialized world of live presentations that are being attended by a live audience. They're watching a live show, but it just happens to also be broadcast or webcast or streaming, whatever it might be. And then we know there's something different about a live show, and just the fact that it may have hundreds of cues. It's unlike any standard television show or film. And so it just needs to have a completely different approach. And that's kind of what we're talking about. It's got to work technically for the camera, but it's also got to work aesthetically. So that's why I think that sets this book apart from your standard cinematography or TV lighting textbook.
Well, I have to agree with that. Or Jim, do you have a response to that?
Well, to me, it's the difference between cuts in a movie and cues in theater. With a film, I can go in there and do one sentence with an actor and then stop, completely relight it, take it from a little bit different angle or a two-shot or reverse, and roll film again for a short time. Or videography, by the way. I mean, film is almost, I hate to say it because I'll get shot, but film is almost dead because the cameras are so sensitive now. If you delve into some of the manufacturers that are out there, like the Red Camera and the others, that their depth of field and the dynamic range is so great that we're really pushing the film people a lot. And a lot of the film people are now marketing video cameras. So that'll tell you something. But I think it comes down to the difference between what we do with a board and cues and what a film person does with a set of flags and fixtures on rolling stands and all of that sort of thing. Makes it a lot different.
The other thing to bear in mind is that a multi-camera production sees things from angles that even the audience doesn't see, and the camera is picking this up. But this is an advantage to the home viewer. They're seeing things that the live audience isn't able to see. If it's a concert, maybe they're seeing around the back of a piano and seeing the fingers on the keyboard. But if it's a play, they might just be seeing a shot from the wings and seeing what's happening from that point of view, depending on how the director decides to shoot it. And so there are so many more things to be thinking about than the theatrical designer might have thought about. So once again, what our book is trying to do is remind the designers that there is so much more to this than meets the eye from a sort of a front of house point of view.
So who is the ideal audience for this book?
Well, I think that it's students, design students that might want to have these techniques under their belt, or maybe feel like this is a field that they would like to specialize in. But I think it also could have an appeal to working professionals, working stage lighting professionals that might either see the way the world is going and realize that they may want to be more involved when their show is being captured for TV and to be a part of the process, or maybe they're interested in a career shift themselves. What do you think, Jim?
I think it also goes to graduate students and professionals. I mean, on the concert lighting books, as it started out about rock and roll and concerts, but as the 4 volumes grew, we got into how these techniques are used in every type of venue you can think of to solve problems. I mean, let's face it, we're problem solvers before we're artists. We've got to solve the problem of being able to see the talent or whatever the product is that's being shot. So these techniques might not be your primary concern, but as we know in any production meeting, I need to know a little bit about costumes, fabric. I need to know a little bit about makeup. I need to know a little bit about virtually every area of my production so I can talk intelligently or deal intelligently with the production when we go to work on it. And knowing about this production of screens and projection surfaces, for instance, is part of that. You got to, even if you're not being put in charge of it as the lighting director, to acquire this material, you better know what the material is going to do.
Well, I have to ask my super geeky question. Because I needed this book a year ago because I just went through how many productions at school pretending I knew what I was doing, right?
And you should have called us. You should have called us.
I should have. What was I thinking? Yeah, there's so much to learn. But on page 29 of the book, you mentioned a target foot candle level, which I assume is taken by a light meter in a queue, and it's very low compared to what we have in theater. So my curiosity stems from when you design the plot. Like when I design a theater plot, I try to make every fixture photometrically at 200 foot candles about on the stage at full intensity. Do you still design the plot the same, or do you know that you're going to be at these lower levels, and so you design it photometrically with lower levels?
Well, I don't use a meter anymore. I did, in my early years, but I figured if I haven't got an eye for this stuff by now, then something's wrong. I eat my carrots, I keep my eyes good, and but a very trained eye is important, and you need to practice that. Plus, a lot of knowledge on what the output of your different fixtures. So it's the old thing about if you have an overhead light you want to use, and you know that you don't want it to be very bright, you don't use a 2K fixture. You're going to use a 750 or a 500 watt so that you're not going a color shift in the fixture. Well, it's the same thing with this. You're going to have to look at the areas that you're trying to light and balance the lighting for that. So trying to get to 200 foot candles on a stage is right or wrong. I mean, I just did a play at 90 foot candles with all projection screens, and it was more than bright enough. I didn't need to go that bright. So I think it really goes to the production you're doing.
Well, it's really kind of different for every sort of presentation, kind of based on the genre of the show. But a lot of it has to do with logistical things like the size of the venue and other factors. If you're designing a show that's being shot in a stadium, and I do a fair amount of those, you can't necessarily indulge in those really low levels that you might want to, because people further away just won't see the show. And the same thing in an arena. And, even though there are certain shows like a Super Bowl halftime, they're so specific about those 12 minutes of show time, and it's seen by billions of people. And, it's such a high profile presentation that they can justify levels that might be too low for the live audience. But every show can't get away with that. So to kind of answer your question, when I'm designing a show, I kind of, just as Jim was saying, I pick fixtures that can accommodate the levels that are appropriate for that show and for that venue and the size of it. If you have to light an audience and say room architectural elements that can be part of a TV special, then if you're starting off with lower levels on the talent, that means you can give the audience a break and not have to light them so brightly and all the other elements, because the cameras open up wide and they're capable of seeing things quite nicely. So it's more about the relative foot candle levels, one light versus another, than it is whether you have high levels or low levels. But I'd say, given a choice, we usually prefer these days to go for the lowest levels. There are all kinds of advantages to lighting at lower levels. Could be as low as 8 foot candles on the audience, and then maybe 15 or 20 on the primary talent, and maybe even a little bit lower on the background talent and on the scenery. But, it can go up to 75 foot candles on a performer in a stadium just because you need to do that. And then, of course, the video screens are often what drives up overall levels, because they sometimes just can't be set low enough without degrading their quality. And so the whole show has to kind of kowtow to the levels of the video screen so that the video doesn't blow out on camera.
It's interesting because I remember many years ago, I went to see a taping of The Tonight Show, Jay Leno, and that was shot in high def at the time. And I was in the studio audience, and I couldn't believe how low the lighting levels were on stage in the studio. But on camera looked fantastic. And I think that's some of the best training you can get from just sitting there and comparing what's happening on the soundstage and seeing the monitor above you and how great it looks.
That's the education right there. Exactly.
Yeah. So I just recommend that to all the students out there learning, especially if you're close to, a major metropolitan area like New York, LA, or whatever. Go and check out some of these shows. Become a studio audience member, because you will learn so much about that. And the chips in these cameras are so sensitive. When you said 9 foot candles, and I think you said that in the book. I think you said something like 3 or 4 at one point. It's like, wow, this is like unbelievable. But Jim, you do have to also prepare for wide dynamic range there.
But true, there's 2 things here. One of the reasons on the talk shows, by the way, is because the talent doesn't want to be lit hot and sweat.
Right.
It's a real issue.
Makes sense, yeah.
The light levels are kept low for the comfort of the talent that's on the show. Secondly, you have to consider that the cameramen have to focus. And when you're at a low light level, staying in focus is harder for them. They have to be good. So these cameramen that are doing these talk shows shouldn't be put down. They're doing their best to keep a show looking good, rather than what they might have to do with a high-end production that has a light level that makes it easier for them to focus. But yeah, that's interesting that they have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like somebody like Bruce Springsteen, just because I know his performance so well, and he's so active on stage, you can't light his show at the lowest levels that you might want for most of the show, because he's just moving around too much. The cameras just can't hold focus.
So there's this old adage, the camera needs a lot of light. Is that because of the technology, how it used to be?
Yeah, used to be.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the cameras these days can really get away with very, very low levels, and it's entirely possible for them to, produce beautiful pictures. Sometimes even better. I mean, they say that you want to find a sweet spot to look the best. But there are so many advantages to letting the camera open up wide in terms of depth of field and whether the background goes soft and so forth. But no, it used to be that cameras needed ridiculous amounts of light. 200-foot candles wasn't unusual, right, Jim?
Yeah, when we started out. Going back to the book for a second, there is a chapter about cameras and projectors. And you look at some of the technical data of what the three cameras that we show on that is just out of a range. I don't remember now. I think there's 11 companies now making high definition professional cameras. So you have to look at some of the specifications for these to see what as Jeff just said, what is the sweet spot for each of these cameras, and know that information before you start to do your production. It goes back to that production meeting. When they tell you what cameras they're going to use, you need to have in mind, that means I got to do this for light level.
Yeah, there's some homework that has to be done, and the designer should know what lenses are being used as well. But, it's as much about that dynamic range that you talk about, because which essentially means, can the camera see at the same time something that's lit really in low light and something that's lit a lot brighter? The old cameras couldn't really take much of a differential between the darkest and the brightest things in the picture frame. Whereas the newer cameras can have something in the same frame that's really dim and really bright, which is kind of what the eye can do even better. So that's what we're enjoying today, better dynamic range.
I'd like to throw in a curveball here because I think it relates to this question. And that is with the wide range of monitors that the audience are watching these shows on, like, someone could have a cheap LED screen or can go to a 4K OLED screen. What compromises do you make? Like in the old days when they'd mix for pop songs, the producer would listen to it, usually the final mix on a 3-inch speaker, because that is what most people heard music on in their cars, 3-inch speakers. It's a long time ago, obviously. But still, there needs to be a compromise made to what the dynamic range is going to be. Because, like, for instance, there was one episode of Game of Thrones. The entire episode was a battle scene that took place at night and shot at night. And a lot of people complained because they couldn't see it on their screens.
I do think that to a certain extent, reality dictates that we do need to be thinking of the viewer that's watching on something that, some of those monitors themselves can cost $20,000. The ones that are in the studio.
Yeah, that you guys use.
And
right.
Actually, the video controller gets a great one, and usually the lighting designer gets a great one as well. So I'm looking at this, very advanced picture that on a monitor that has a wide contrast ratio. And then I see the director is actually looking at something on like a plasma, something akin to a plasma, because the director is really just kind of looking at it as a reference, what's in the shot. And sometimes theirs is so much brighter than ours, and you have to find something in between, because you realize when you're looking at it on the director's monitor, that is perhaps what everybody out there in the world is seeing. So it's not perfect. If everybody had a $20,000 TV set, then maybe we could indulge in that. But you're absolutely right. And I do remember the first time I was in a recording studio and they switched from the massive refrigerator-sized speakers to the tiny ones.
Right, the 3-inch car speaker.
What is that all about? And they explained it just like you did.
Yeah.
I got in trouble on a production where the director turned around to the producer and me in the booth and said, "I can't see the audience." And I looked at the producer and he looked at me and I looked at the video controller, and he's got his thumbs up saying, basically saying it's okay, but the director's monitor wasn't that good. So what are we supposed to do? Stop a live show, and relight?
So and like Bill Klages, who is one of the the other fathers of TV lighting. His famous phrase is, the most important piece of equipment in the entire show is the producer's monitor. You want that thing calibrated correctly so that they're seeing it as good as possible.
Let me ask you guys a question. Why do you think there's a natural resistance, I mean, particularly among theater designers, to this idea of applying television lighting techniques to their productions?
Good, more work for us.
Well, the reason I bring that up is I remember years ago someone talking about the evolution of the Parcan, and it was going to be an important theatrical piece of equipment. And you would have thought it was a scene from Frankenstein. The audience was like, "What do you mean, Parcans? They have no place in ballet. They have no place in opera." And we know that's bumpkus.
Well, there's this assumption that the TV crew is going to come in and completely wash away all the beauty and the dynamics with like a big fire hose wash of white light everywhere. And it's not necessary anymore for a couple of reasons. The cameras don't need that. And I think also, as I alluded to earlier, I think our aesthetic sensibility has evolved to accept some things that might not have been acceptable years ago. I absolutely remember as a young designer working on concert tours that were being filmed, on film, and the team would come in and they'd sort of brush me aside, tell me to go sit over there while they relit my show, and that is what they did. This team had just come from doing a margarine commercial or something like that, and this is the way they operated. And these days, we don't really care about that. We are looking to translate the live show to the screen. And sometimes that allows for certain compromises, and it allows for some imperfections, and it allows for effects and things like that. So there is a natural resistance, I think, because of that assumption that we're going to come in and totally screw with their show. Dark scenes will become bright, colored scenes will become white, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the aesthetic and the skills that today's television lighting designers have goes way beyond that, and I think people can calm down knowing that we want to translate that show accurately.
I think that's why you see Jeff working on so many of these big festivals as a consultant, because he has that sensibility of knowing what it is like to light for a major star in a concert situation, and yet do it so that they have this residual audience that makes the producers a hell of a lot of money, after the festival is over, or live stream while the festival is on, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I think so. It sometimes only takes a little tweak to change an angle a little, or a level of intensity, or a degree of saturation, or maybe a little bit of light on the background to make it a viable shot. In rock and roll in particular, there are so many cues where 45 Sharpies all converge on the singer center stage. And it's an impossible shot. It's an effect, but it's almost an impossible shot. Sometimes you can kind of mess with that a little bit, change the intensity, maybe have one of the lights actually hit the performer and all the others be around him, anything like that. There are just a myriad of tricks that we have in order to make the show look like it's supposed to look without killing the cameras. And then the people at home actually get to see the effect somewhat the way the people in the live audience see it.
Well, I have a question about, from an author standpoint, co-authoring a book. You talked a little bit about your process, meeting in the delis. I love that. But how do you divide up the work or share the work? I've always been curious because I haven't co-authored, like how people do it.
First of all, I think you have to have a sense of that the two people have a same sense of what you're trying to do, that they're not going in different directions. Once you've got sort of an agreement as to where you're going with the project, then it all falls into place. Basically, we sat down and each of us came up with a list of chapters, and then we melded those together. We added, we took away. I think we lost like 3 chapters, wasn't it, Jeff, that we threw out in the end after we'd written them?
Yeah, and we changed the order a lot.
Oh, yeah, a lot of changing of the order so that it flowed better. So finding a co-author is really something that's not that easy, but as long as you can get that sense of how you're going to work together and dole out the work, if you will, so that each partner gets to have their say back and forth, that it's not, no man is an island that just, write something and that it's only going to be read the way they want it to read. You've got a good partnership, that's all. It's just like in business. When Jeff and I were partners in a business, it was the same thing. We came into the book knowing how each of us worked, having been together for those years of having the business.
Yeah, how do you handle the writing? How do you get it to be one voice?
Yeah, that's a good question. We definitely benefited from our years of collaborating, and I've read everything Jim has ever written, so I pretty much know his style. And even though I have my own, that back and forth sharing of the material allowed for an interesting weave of our word patterns and our descriptions. So the idea is that you don't really see when we swap.
Well, it's beautiful. You can't tell, like, oh, this person mostly did this one. And, it's just so well written. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. So speaking of the book, tell us about the process you take the reader through to gain an understanding of the techniques of lighting a live show for television.
Well, we tried to come up with some sort of logical flow. So we kind of start with the science, about how the camera sees differently than the eye. And I think it's important to give the reader some terminology, things about exposure and f-stops and lenses and kind of how the camera works. And then we kind of take it from there into the art, which is about the balance and the color and composition and how those things are used to help create, the artistic part of the shot. And then we kind of dabble in the equipment, not lighting equipment, because really we're talking about using theatrical lights 9 times out of 10 in these shows. But so we do talk about cameras and projection, a lot about projection, and LED
the screens. The screen material. But Jeff actually had to hold me back there. I was overwriting too much detail about a lot of these things, and he had to tell me, wait a minute, we're not trying to make these people technicians. We're trying
right.
We're trying to educate lighting designers enough that they will fit in the production scheme of things successfully. So when you read it, you'll find we didn't. You're going to say, well, they could have told me more about this camera, or they could have told me more about this material. Well, that wasn't the end-all idea. Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to say too much, or else the book becomes obsolete.
No kidding.
I think it's a great balance that you guys have achieved here.
Well, the whole idea was not to go into these big scientific treatises, because you can get that information in lots of places. We wanted to give the designer a basic sense of the technology that they were dealing with, and then take it from there.
So, gentlemen, besides lighting for televised events, I feel that the book has so much more to offer. What else does it cover?
It's quite a bit about lighting for LEDs, as well as just the LED technology itself.
And you want to talk about something that's changing fast, that's the LEDs. You literally weekly, as we would visit some manufacturers or read up on stuff, they were telling us new stuff that they hadn't even put out yet.
Right. Have you guys seen the new ETC Series 3 fixture with that extra a red LED in it?
Yes.
Red LED?
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen demos of it online.
Do you think that is the missing ingredient? Is LED not ready for video when it comes to color rendering on the skin?
Well, I kind of thought that actually the luster is pretty darn close itself. It's got a pretty good range. But I think that red, everybody talks about how there's that R9 factor when you're looking at CRI, and CRI, of course, is a questionable metric these days anyway. But it is true. If you even with at TLCI, when you get a little bit of red in there, your numbers go up and the skin tones get better. So I think they may be onto something. I mean, it's all about sticking as much of the spectrum into the light as you possibly can.
Yeah, when it comes to LED,
yes,
exactly.
That's
what it is.
Exactly. And if they do it right, it could probably surpass tungsten, but not yet.
Ooh, that's a cool prediction. I have a question. In the book, you give some real-world examples and case histories of actual productions, which is very cool. I love the photos, especially of your work. Could you tell us what your most interesting production experience was and what you learned from it?
Well, the one that I liked the best was a production of Glory of Living. And it was a film script that the director brought to us and said, I want to do this. But the scenic designer and I both read the script and went, oh my God, there's no way to do this. This thing takes 35 scenes, for this play. And there's no way we were going to do it in our black box theater at the college. So there was nowhere to move all this scenery. So how would it be done? Well, Teshi Narakawa, who was a scenic designer, and I'd worked with him before, had done some video work. And we had actually worked on a 1984 play where there was video in that for the face that you see overseeing the workers. And so he had some experience and I had with just a single screen, but we hadn't done anything that would be 3-wall the way this was. And for your information, we ended up lighting it at 90-foot candles on 18 by 12-foot walls that were 16 feet from the projector. And that was because the projectors we could get our hands on to match would work in that size room to fill those screens. And it really worked out very well because the projectors could be changed to go from the hotel room to the lobby to the police station, to all these places back and forth very quickly with just a crossfade or fade to black and then fade back up if there was a little bit of a scenery changed on the set, and was very, very successful without having to build other than metal frames for the screens. So I really enjoyed that.
That's great. What about you, Jeff?
Well, I can't really say there was any one most interesting show. It kind of changes year by year, but I've had a lot of jobs that have presented pretty big logistical challenges. Sometimes there are venues with really bad or non-existent hanging positions or scenery that, got in the way.
In the book, you talk about having to deal with no front light positions, which I thought was very interesting.
I mean, it happens. So that can be really frustrating, or you're trying to keep lights out of the shot and the scenery somehow doesn't allow you to do that. But one of the most difficult shooting environments is where you don't have enough depth behind the talent to keep all the light from spilling on the backgrounds, and that seems to happen to me on a regular basis.
Oh no, that's terrible.
I did a comedy special a few years ago that had a gigantic wall of scenery fairly close to where the comedian was going to be working, and fortunately I was able to push it back just enough so that the front spots wouldn't spill all over it. But as it happens a lot, the producers and set designer fell in love with the idea of having a glossy floor.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. That's almost worse because it's upside down.
That's right. And so, and this was despite my warnings, they just wanted it. So, of course, the front follow spot was reflecting off the floor right onto the comedian's upside down shadow. We're now right behind him. So, of course, everyone looked at me to say, what am I going to do about it?
Luma sucked.
Right, exactly. So, and I have this sort of preference for one clean follow spot from the center. It just kind of keeps the shadows right for a multi-camera show. Good shadows on the face and on the body, and then just one kind of ring of light on the floor. But that was the one that was creating the reflection. So I really had no choice but to use two wider front follow spots instead, and created some compromises that I didn't like. Everybody thought that it was a brilliant solution, and loved the way the show looked, and the show did look okay. But to me, it was a second best solution, and those things happen. I've got dozens of those stories.
For our listeners, I just want to say that your section on dealing with follow spots and follow spot techniques and lamping and balancing is worth the price of the book by itself. Absolutely fabulous.
Cool. I'm happy to hear you say that.
Wheel of Fortune, we used to take it on the road. And the scenic artist was very good, but he also was very cantankerous and did what he wanted to do. He'd been around a long time, won a lot of Emmys, so nobody screwed with him. But we got along. It wasn't a problem. But we did one in Ohio, and he decided it was going to be a farm set. Okay, that's fine. Do an outline of a barn and do those kind of things. But what I didn't see, and certainly wasn't on any sketch reel I ever saw, was they brought studio tile green and laid it all on the stage. And of course, what happened? All the talent looked green because of the bounce off of the tile.
Right.
So I got the call, fix it. And I said, well, get rid of the tile. We couldn't do that. All right. So what do you do? Well, the answer actually was to put blue in a bunch of lights that were focused out on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Change the color of the tile. But, that you're faced with things like that every day. And that's why we're problem solvers.
Problem solvers, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
we are. Yeah.
Because
anyway.
Who would come up with that idea to light the floor to make the shadows different color? I mean, that's brilliant. I mean,
or a
really,
person who's desperate.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so I've got another question here. You've got two chapters in your book. One is called Adapting a Live Show, and the other is called Made for TV. Can you go into the difference there?
That's basically about taking a show that might already have been completely designed as a live stage show with all the aesthetics and tricks that would go into that design, and then having it be scheduled for a shoot where every cue needs to be examined. Sometimes every light needs to just go up or down in intensity a little bit. Maybe you will avoid using certain lights that aren't going to be flattering on the talent, changing follow spot colors, doing all of those things that will, hopefully subtly tweak the show into working a lot better for the camera. Then you've got your shows that are made for TV, and that is a show that is designed from its inception as a television show, where the television designer is the show designer as well, and everything about the show is done from scratch with the camera in mind. So obviously adapting the live show, there's a challenge to doing that because so many things do require adjustment, and then the flip of that is the show that has to be designed correctly from the beginning, and there's no excuses.
Do you have a preference?
Well, ultimately, I would prefer the made-for-TV show, where I'm in charge of where everything goes and how it's used, as opposed to fixing up the live show. It can be done. I think I've kind of turned it into a subspecialty, but it's a lot harder. You are dealing with emotions of other people in a very different way than you are on that show that's made for TV. Everybody's kind of holding on and, kind of white-knuckling all the way through on an adapted show. What is this going to look like? Am I going to recognize the show? I've been through it. I've been on the receiving end of it. So I believe I can tell those clients and the lighting team, they will recognize and they will appreciate what's going on. But ultimately, you're dealing with their child, their baby.
Jim, what do you think?
I would only have to agree with Jeff. I haven't done as many of those as Jeff has done, especially the made for TV. But the emotions of the people that you're working with, the director, the talent. You really are a babysitter. You've got to try to make them understand that they're still going to have their show and it's going to be right. They just have to agree to a little bit of modifications. That's all.
All right. Well, I have the last question. You are both highly regarded professional mentors. What is your advice for young lighting designers entering this side of the profession?
Well, I think you have to be as versatile as possible. So we all come out of theater schools, basically, with an undergraduate degree, a BA in minor, maybe in theater or whatever. But you've got to be as versatile as you possibly can. You can't live and you can't sustain a career on just one form of lighting. I mean, look at Jeff doing comedy shows to festivals. My work on Entertainment Tonight, to Wheel of Fortune, to Jeopardy, and other shows. So the schools have to provide the students a wider range of interests that they can at least touch on in that first 2 or 3 years, so that they can decide to go on to graduate school or not. And I don't think you have to go on to graduate school. I did. Jeff didn't. Look, it came out pretty well for him. So just be open to as much as you can, so that we were talking about, mentioned the Cucaloris to a pattern in a Lico. Well, it's the same thing. You got to understand some of the techniques that are done in film. For instance, a flag. Can you use a flag in theater? Oh my God, a flag? Sure you can. Sure you can. There is a place and a time for solving a problem again. So why not use it? So, learn as much as you can about all the areas. Read books, take seminars, go to the conventions when they come back, and intern with people. Gives you a lot of things. I mean, my time interning with Jules Fisher was a marvelous time for me to learn what Jules was able to pass on in the time that I was with him. Was invaluable.
How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I think there are a few basic rules of lighting for the camera, whether it's film or still photography, or what we talk about as multi-camera television. And those things have to do with angle and exposure and color, and I think they're pretty easy to grasp. And a few on-the-job experiences are going to pretty much drum it into your head very quickly. You're going to know what your mistakes are, you're going to correct them and get onto it. But developing your eye and understanding the viewer's experience, those people that can only see the results of what you're lighting on their TV or their computer or their phone, that's what takes a lot of time to develop that sense of sight. And the sooner younger designers start developing their eye, the better. Really just observing. And just like any other part of industry, you have to find a way to get out there and work, whether it's part of the crew or as an assistant or working for free for somebody who needs help with their shoot, just to observe what happens on the screen when lighting conditions change, and just what David was talking about. When you look at the stage and then you look at the monitor and see what that discrepancy is. And if you can, just find a way to absorb that. And as Jim said, intern and learn from anyone who's willing to teach.
Wow, some really wonderful and sage advice from two masters of lighting. Thank you guys for being here today. What a great conversation, but it only touches maybe 1/8 of the book. So I just want to wish you great success.
Thank you so much.
There's no doubt that this is going to happen, because I'm making the book required reading for all my lighting students, and I'm sure I'm talking for Ann and Steve as well.
Fabulous.
It's a book that just is timely, well written, and extremely interesting. So everyone, go out, buy this book. It's quite affordable at $39.95 on Amazon. My book is like $60, and it's not half as good as this one. So it's an absolute deal. And isn't there a special discount code for 20% off or something like that? I saw.
Yeah. It's ESBACK, ESBACK.
But that's a limited time, though, so you have to get into it.
Okay, so yes, I think it's only like for another week or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link on our Light Talk Facebook group, and so that when you buy the book, you'll get an extra 20% off.
Super, super.
And I want to thank Rutledge and Focal Press, who Focal Press is produced all my concert books. But I think Jeff will agree with me that they really went out of their way to give us as much help as they possibly could, and were always there to answer our questions and move us along to get this thing done. So we're really proud of what the outcome was, and proud of working with Rutledge and Focal Press.
Yeah.
And for all the lighting students out there and lighting educators and professional lighting designers, thank you very much, guys. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, and just added Amazon Prime. That's right, you can buy Jeff and Jim's book and listen to us at the same time. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
You know, I feel that I should say something different, because I always say no guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any of these statements, but that's just not true today. But
if you decide to litigate, the firm of Flecht, Flocht, Flair, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sistah, coming to you from Long Beach, San Clemente, Studio City, the Channel Islands, and just off the Chisholm Trail.
And tune in next week when we welcome legendary projection designer Wendell Harrington to Light Talk.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So thanks again to our friends Jim Moody and Jeff Ravitz, and we will see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.